Like to call to order the Charter Township of Chesterfield Regular Township Board meeting for Tuesday, June 24th, 2025 to order at 7 p.m. Could we all please stand, face the flag, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk Berry, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Here.
Treasurer Elliott.
Here.
Trustee Anderson.
Here.
Trustee Joseph.
Here.
Trustee Hornberger. Here. Trustee Vosberg. Here. Clerk Berry is here.
Item 4, approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve the agenda. Is there any support?
Second.
Clerk Berry, discussion? Seeing no discussion, Clerk Berry, would you call the roll?
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Hornberger. Aye. Trustee Vosberg. Aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 5, we have presentations tonight. We have 2 of them. And item 5A, Clerk Berry.
Item 5A is a presentation to recognize Boy Scout Nickolas Koziol in honor of his Eagle Scout project repairing and restoring park benches in the historical village.
Trustee Vosberg.
I'd like to honor Nickolas Koziol, who was very busy last fall and this spring taking care of the park benches that are in the historical village in front of the township offices. They've got into very bad disrepair. He was able to come with his crew of volunteers and take care of them. However, in the middle of the project, there was some severe weather, so he had to put it off until this spring. That's why it took so long. But I'd like to thank you very much, Nickolas, for being willing to do that. I know it took a lot of work. It wasn't always easy, but you did a good job, and your crew did a good job. How many volunteers do you know about? How many you had?
We had about 20 volunteers.
20? Wow, very good. And about how many person hours did that take? Did you keep track of that?
About 120.
120, wow, very good. So thank you. So just like to read this, let it be known that it is a pleasure to have the opportunity to recognize Nickolas Koziol for the completion of his Eagle Scout project, repairing and restoring the park benches located in Chesterfield Township's historic village. In addition to the many hours spent on the project himself, as well as other volunteers, Mr. Koziol fundraised to cover all the cost of the project. In special tribute, therefore, this letter is signed and dedicated on this 24th day of June 2025 with a tremendous amount of thanks to Eagle Scout Nickolas Koziol for the facilitation and completion of the repair and painting of the park benches. Thank you again. Let's take a picture. Hold that up. Hold that up and we'll get a picture. Yep, let's stay here a minute. There you go. Let's get everybody up here. Is that guy?
I know who's going to help me cut down trees next time, too. Next up, item 5B. Clerk Berry.
Item 5B is a presentation by Hubbell, Roth, and Clark, Inc., HRC, for the Chesterfield Township Water Rate Study.
Mr. Burton, the floor is yours. Is that better? Thank you. Good evening, trustees and audience. My name is Jamie Burton with Hubbell, Roth, and Clark. I'm going to be walking through a presentation on current trends, financial concerns, and opportunities for recommendations as it relates to water and sewer rates. So before I begin, it's my understanding I'm going to make this presentation, and then I'm going to come back up during the resolution discussion if there's any additional questions, comments, or concerns that I can help address. So I will work my way through this presentation. So for the audience, this is a little bit, you may not be able to read the boxes, but I'm going to kind of walk through the basics of water and sewer rate setting. This is been part of a couple different efforts that the township has undertaken that HRC has been assisting with. One was the connection fee study. The second was looking at the actual costs of service. So we mapped out for about 6 to 7 years all dollars that were spent in the water and sewer fund for trending and basis. We tracked every dollar as to where that was coming in, where that was going to, and presented those things a few years ago, and there's a slide in there. So cost of service is how much money do you need? So what is the revenue requirement you need to meet the cash obligations of the township on an annualized basis? Simply put, I talk to it in terms of pie. How big is the piece of, how big is the pie that you need water and sewer rates to collect? The next step is to allocate how should those costs be allocated. So who are the customers? Who should be responsible to take these costs? The third step is goal setting, okay? And so the top two, steps 1 and 2 is finance, mathematics, it is accounting, it is numbers, it is essentially what it is. Steps 3 and 4 become a little bit, that's the science part of the process. Below that line kind of becomes a little bit of the art form. What I mean by that is if you had goals to a community, like if you're in Arizona or you're in California where water is a different topic than here in Michigan, you might have a higher cost per irrigation water to promote conservation. There's opportunities for affordability, opportunities for different types of programs within the community goal setting, which we'll talk a little bit. And then the last step is you take a piece of pie, or excuse me, the whole pie is this big. Here's the pieces, people who should get a slice, and here's how you charge for those slices of the pie, okay? And those are kind of the recommendations that we're going to talk about today. So when we started this process, met in actually 2024, where we had the original proposal in the cost of service, and we kind of came up with these overarching objectives, if you will, and kind of where we're headed. So we want to make sure that the rates that drive the revenue needs meet that cost of service. Plain and simple, we need X dollars. Let's make sure we collect X dollars on an annualized basis to fund those needs. We need to look at the service providers. There's 2 major service providers. That's the Great Lakes Water Authority, and then the Great Lakes Water Authority through the county on the sewer side. And recently, from a projection standpoint, those are going to be going up 3 to 5%. Those are your biggest costs, your biggest cost buckets, and we anticipate those going up 3 to 5% per year. We're going to talk a lot about fixed cost recovery. Your service providers, debt service, capital projects, don't matter how much water you sell. So those really become, how do we collect those costs to reduce the financial risk on the township? We'll talk more about that in a minute. Transparency is always a goal. Where is the funding going? Make sure there's good equity between all these users, that when we decide who gets a slice, everybody is treated in a reasonable manner. The township has really ramped up in the last year or two the investments in the system, whether that's the sanitary sewer system or the water system. A lot of capital expenditures, replacement programs, water main line, sewer lining, water main lining, capital projects to improve those systems. And those have been approved through the CIP process, through the township budgeting process. But also the way Macomb County through the drainage district, when they issue bonds, the township gets your percentage of those bonds and debt for those capital projects as well. and that is passed through directly to you. So those are two separate items, but those are going to continue to increase. Those are going to continue to happen. Those are necessary. So a couple distinctions here. One is this is a cash basis analysis. Simply put, it is a checkbook in a savings account that you guys would operate in your home. How much cash do we have? How do we do it? And it only equates to one of your financial statements. We can talk about that if necessary. When you do your township budgeting through the fall for a fiscal year starting July 1, and then you come back, January 1, and you come back for a July 1 rate year change, it seemed to me that we were getting offset, we are offsetting a little bit of that process. So it is the recommendation to bring the water and sewer rate discussion into the township budgeting process on an annualized, an annual basis moving forward. That requires either an 18-month window or a 6-month window. We're proposing a 6-month window to do that first fix. So just to kind of establish where current rates are. So the current rates are shown here on the up on the screen. I'm not going to go through each of those, but I want to highlight a couple nuances. First off, your sprinkler systems, those readiness to serve, which I will talk about more from a system basis in a moment, is less than what a residential or commercial readiness to serve charge is. Second to that is fire lines, which are the largest portion of designing a water system is for fire flow on top of everything else. Currently, fire lines pay $0 for in the event they need it. Your current rates are set up to generate about $16 million if you look into your projections of sales and connections and other things. And you are currently 70% of your water revenue and 81% of your sewer revenue are based on usage. So gallons, the simplest terms are gallons. We can talk about 100 cubic feet, 1,000 cubic feet. But simply put, how much water is used, and 70% of it is collected in that, in those 70% for water, 81% is collected in that in sewer. But the first big challenge, so the pie chart is shown based on the cost of service analysis that was done. It's a little, the graph is a little outdated, but the percentages actually remain very close to the same. What you'll notice on here is that when you break it down, even though we're collecting 70 to 80% of the revenue needs on a gallon charge, only 10 to 15% of your costs, your expenses, are based on those gallons. To say that another way, 85 to 90% of your fees and your cost, your expense, is borne independent of how much water is used, or actually how much sewer is used. How much water and sewer are used do play a factor in setting future rates. But there are trends, there are 5-year trends, 10-year trends, so it may impact it ultimately. But for example, your sewer rate from the mid is 100% fixed on day one, regardless of how much you use. Great Lakes water is at 60%. So to recap these last two slides, you're set up for your rate portion to collect around 16 million. 70-80% of that is based on gallons, but your expenses are inverted to that, and only 10 to 15% are actually based on gallons. So there's a lot of potential financial risk. And I'll mention that, for example, to set the rates today for a year, we're anticipating what water will be sold next year. It's a weather function, okay? And so you look at trends, you look at everything. In fact, we've had a number of rainstorms this year, but it's been 97 degrees. We are basically trying to predict the weather for up to a year. So it's very difficult. So a little bit on system design. I'm going to focus on water because that's really where I think the equity and transparency question comes in. So water systems are designed to be 4 different products in one pipe. So what you have is your average daily demand. That's just what everybody uses in their homes, in their businesses on an average day. That is very actually consistent throughout the year. But then you get into these max daily demands, or these days in the year where maybe it's, you have hours in those days, but long story short, you get summertime. People are washing their car, doing more laundry, the kids are all home from school, those opportunities, you get that extra that extra bump up. On top of that, then you have the summer irrigation. So the third ring up here is really irrigation, is outdoor water use, and has a little bit of the daily variation into it. For example, at 9 a.m. in Chesterfield Township, more people use water than at 1 p.m. because it's the morning rush, 7 to 9 or whatever it might be. On top of all of that is fire flows. So we design a water main system, we design the sewer system a little bit differently, but the same premise applies, where the water system is basically built, the size of the pipe, the pressure and the volume has very little to do with what we use on a daily basis, has everything we need to do to fight fires. And if you go back to a couple slides ago, there's the people who rely upon that for a building suppression system are not paying for that service. The irrigations are paying less than a single family residential, okay? So those are kind of the backdrop for this. So let's talk about what's happening on a pure cash basis. So right now, you have a proposal from Great Lakes, not a proposal, it's a statement from Great Lakes Water that your water revenue requirement is going up $370,000. 60% of that is fixed. So it's 12 monthly installments. We can do the math, I've done the math, but you can work your way through it. Essentially, that's 60% of that number is fixed. The mid-sewer increase is going up $262,000 starting July 1, and that is 100% fixed. That has nothing, zero to do with gallons. Your debt service increase, this is not just the counties, but also the township's debt service is going up just under $600,000. Again, 100% fixed. That's on a fixed table on a fixed chart. DPW has put forth on different CIPs through the budgeting process and rolling over projects that weren't finished last year. You essentially have $7 million of board-approved water system improvement needs on top of those numbers. For the sake of argument at this point, we've just used $1 million for kind of now through December 31st. There are other, there'll be, whether it's labor contracts, material costs. One of your suppliers just sent you a note that said trade costs are going up on equipment 5%. There's a lot of those things going on. Whether grants come in or other non-revenue decreases, the bottom line is if you fully load it, I threw the kitchen sink at this, and I looked at it from an annualized basis, not just 6 months, it's conceivable that there's a $6 to $8 million deficit. So what would happen is you would make that up from your fund balance. And right now, I've looked at the last few years of financial statements. It ebbs and flows because you collect quarterly and you pay every day. Long story short, you're around 8 to 10 million total in the fund balance as we move forward. So it wouldn't be conceivable real quick that could be used up. So this service has nothing to do with the DPW staffing. There's nothing to do with equipment in DPW or anything like that. This is simply the costs that are generated by your providers that will start being billed to you starting July 1, and then a portion of the fixed of the capital improvement charges. So that's where we focused on. And so what is our recommendation or work on the solution to develop this to make up a portion of this shortfall and set the township up for the future to continue to make all those objectives work. So number one is you're going to be billed that $1 million+ from your service providers July 1. That is going to happen. So let's start collecting those on a pass-through basis. Proposal to leave the rates the same. If we are upside down on fixed versus commodity, and we're going to increase fixed, we'll show you in a minute, or recommend that, then maybe the commodity can stay the same. Let's just keep that the same for the time being. Establish a per utility bill, which is administrative cost to all connections. So that very low ring at the bottom that I showed for average daily flow, certain things cost the same no matter if you're the biggest user or the smallest user in town. What would be a recommendation? Those in the cost bucket: fixed, commodity, commercial, residential, and there is something that is common to all. Deal with the sanitary revenue shortfall with the new debt The sanitary, unlike the water, has really taken the hit as it relates to the debt service pass-throughs from the county and the other projects. So that's where a majority of that work needs, to be right-sized. Collect some of the capital improvement projects in an independent charge, adjust the irrigation fire lines to the same costs. So in one way, we are shrinking the number of different types of customers. You're a water customer, you're a sewer customer, and we're going to treat you as equally as we can. If you do all of this on an annualized basis, not 6 months, but on an annualized basis, that would generate, of that 6 to 8 million, of the 7 million of capital needs, about $3 million. So then any funding gap, you would continue to make up in the fund balance in the water and sewer fund. So that would be through December 31st, through the normal budgeting process of the township this fall. We would work and by then we should know preliminary information on increases from the service providers, which would be in July 1. We can look at more sewer debt, and obviously as the board looks at the CIP for the following year, what projects need to be done, and therefore we can adjust those numbers. And then annually thereafter is really keep moving forward and trying. I'm not recommending that we ever try to switch the fixed versus commodity that your residents pay. I believe if you use more water, you should pay more. But I think what we're trying to do is shrink that gap to a reasonable level. So for now, we would leave the commodity rates the same, so everyone pays the same per gallon. But at some point, we would have to adjust that as well. So what does that mean, point blank to everybody, kind of the point of this whole presentation is, what does this look like? So there would be a recommendation for a per bill charge, $4 per bill per quarter. If you guys recall, one other comment on that, if you recall, there was a lot of talk of a legislation to do a $2 per meter charge that would go to the state of Michigan that died in lame duck, but it's still being out there. This is kind of some way to protect the township if that ever were to occur. And again, there's a lot of cost. Not a lot. There's a minimal amount of the overall $17 million utility that is, it doesn't matter what you do, it's common to all. So taking just the pass-through, so these are the increases that we talked about, and the current readiness to serve, that's what RTS means, readiness to serve units on each of them. There are more water units because of fire lines and irrigation lines than there are sewer. And breaking these out, you see what the increased per quarter would be per RTS. Now, here's kind of the table. So you take those numbers, if I can go back. So you take these numbers, I'm sorry, Brad, if I hit you with it doesn't go that far. If you take the increases and apply them to your current rate structure, here's the new rate table. So to highlight briefly, you were charging 8 cents less, 8 cents more for sprinkler. The idea would be to keep sprinkler, again, you pay per gallon the same no matter what service you provide. Provide the sprinkler charge and the fire line charges to be equivalent to to a family residential. The equivalency, they would pay more than a single family residential, but why are single family or low, those folks subsidizing the operation and maintenance of the system? So ultimately what this means is all residential customers would see, because based on how the township calculates the RTS, would see a $22.84 per quarter increase. Absent the ebbs and flows of water usage, or you're using more or less water, this is just flat fee that would be up there, so $7.61 per month. Commercial would pay the $4 plus the RTS factor times whatever RTS they actually have. So, most homes have a 1-inch or lower line. They have up to 8-inch lines going in. The bundle of all of those meters, the bundles of all those lines are what make up the size of the water main that we just talked about, okay? So that's everybody, it's a bundle of straws, if you will. And so they would pay a higher amount because they have more capacity, and the system is designed to service them during a fire, and so forth. So irrigation lines are made equal, fire lines are paid equal, and those are the information from there. So where we're at, so we've mapped every dollar spent in the last number of years. We've taken those dollars, we've put them into a recommendation for rate changes to simply make the structure address the fixed versus commodity discrepancies that you have and make those recommendations into the rates. Based on that, to implement some of these, there will be an ordinance modification required, and that would be proposed to be brought back to you in a future meeting, depending on your comments and thoughts from tonight. We would not implement the per bill charge or the fire charge until the ordinance amendment is complete, if that makes sense. Those just need to be more clearly defined in the ordinance. So it might be a month or two before those would be collected anyways. So that's the extent of my presentation. I will sit down and then I'll be available during the resolution conversation to answer any and all questions and provide any other additional details you guys need. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to item 6, department reports. Are there any department reports? Start with board members. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. The permanent ballot request forms that many of you have received were mailed out approximately a month ago. These requests must be completed if you want to continue receiving a permanent ballot mailed to you every election that you are eligible to vote in. If you do not complete this form, you will not be mailed a ballot, and we are no longer sending out absentee ballot applications automatically. They will only be on request. So if you would want to continue to be on the kind of set it and forget it program for your ballots for every election, it's very important that it's critical that you return that completed form to us. If you have any questions about that, please contact the clerk's office and we can answer any questions you have with that. Also, new voter registration cards will be mailed to voters in precincts 9 and 10. These are voters and electors who live north of 23 Mile Road to 26 Mile Road and from Fairchild Road to I-94. These are voters who will now vote at Lance Cruz Middle School East, which is 30300 Hickey Road, instead of Higgins Elementary, 29901 24 Mile Road, as they have for many years. That change was unanimously approved by the board after a recommendation from the Election Commission at our last meeting. This change of venue is only approximately 500 feet. However, we will be providing the required signage at Higgins Elementary for the next year, as is required to redirect voters in 2026 to Lance Cruz Middle School East. Also, confirmation notices were mailed to 480 voters who were reported by the USPS as a national change of address list. If you received one of these confirmation notices, it is very, very important that you contact the clerk's office or respond to that notice to make sure that all voters are on the appropriate rolls in the appropriate municipalities. Otherwise, when you go to vote in 2026, if that hasn't been addressed, you're going to run into problems. Either you'll go into your previous location, they'll tell you you're not registered there. You'll go to your new location, they'll say you're not registered there, because the reality is we would have to drop you from the rolls if we don't hear from you, and your new municipality cannot automatically register you. So it is very important, if you're one of those 480 voters who received a confirmation notice, that you respond to that notice so that either our office or your new clerk's office can take the appropriate steps to make sure you are properly registered. Our Shred Day was a huge success. We had a record number of residents who came out and took advantage of that service. Almost 200 residents were served that day. And we are currently, in response to the many requests, planning a Saturday event in late September. As soon as we get that date nailed down, we will inform all of our residents, make sure it's posted on our website and social media. We are going to extend the hours on that Saturday. Normally it's only a couple of hour window at our regular Shred Day, but because this will be a Saturday Shred Day and we expect even more participation, we will be extending the window of time for which you can come and have your documents securely shredded here, up at the township offices. Last and not least, the clerk's office has been moved from our temporary home in the senior wing to our new home, which is over in the main area of our newly refurbished building. So if you need something from the clerk's office, please come and visit us at the main counter, and we'll be happy to serve you. Thanks.
Treasurer Elliott?
Thank you. Your summer tax bills will be arriving over the weekend and on Monday. Payments cannot be accepted until Tuesday, July 1st. Those payments can be made online in the office or at First State Bank, the drop box. And then remember, those are your summer taxes that are for your school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further reports, department reports, I'll go with item 7, public comments on agenda items only. There's a 3-minute time limit. If you would please state your name for the record. It's not required, just helps us keep track. The mic is open. Public comments on agenda items only.
Joe Kadich, live on Sutton. This has to do with an agenda item where you're going to, I guess, vote on whether you're going to accept the rates proposed on the presentation. And I know you guys all had a meeting before this was set up, which should have been open to the public. It was never announced. I guess telling you guys to be sure on this. But just listening to this thing, I had some problems with it. Right off the bat, he says we pull in $16 million a year in revenue. Every budget you've looked at for the last number of years verifies over $18 million. And it's one of the problems I've had with that, the fact that depreciation is already in the cost of the water. About $1.99 on water, a little over $1 on sewer. That money's disappeared, not only before you, probably $12 million during your time, and probably half that time when Accavetti was in here. There's been no resolution on here, and what he's putting together, I have no idea. We were going to have a comparison about everything that's in the charge on the water. I've not seen that. This whole thing is a farce. You know, when you were first appointed here, both Paul Lafata and I said you ought to have a water board. We volunteered. Paul volunteered to do it himself. And you ignored that, mainly because you were able to tap into the water fund and take money from it to use on other things. All this does is kind of paper over all of that. And the people are paying for it. Now, on the ready to reserve now, we set that up. The only capital item, not capital, bond item in there was for the repair of the mid down in 15 Mile Road. Now it's going up how much? I can understand it going up to pay for the sewer line you put on 26 Mile Road. That's $600 a year, 600,000, excuse me. We have no idea where in the hell this money is being spent or why it's even being collected. You guys vote for this. It shows you how much you really want to help the people of this township. You all ran for it. I wanted to help. I wanted to do this. But I don't see anybody out there asking any questions like this. Did you even understand what's in this thing? You ought to have something out there, have a real presentation where people can question it, not just show something on a board you can hardly see and gloss over it like it's nothing. There's big increases in here. You're seeing a pass-through. The pass-through is minimal. Like I say, it's probably 9 cents on water, not much more on sewer per 1,000 gallons.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Hello, my name's Benjamin. I live on DW Seaton. I don't have anything to say directly to the presentation. I just wanted to point out to anyone who may be experiencing financial distress and concern about water and sewage that the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, in 2015, so 10 years ago, they published an article about water filtration that showed you could, with 100% efficacy, filter water with tree branches. In Africa, they're using clay pots. It's just, I'm seeing dollar amounts like $2 million, $6 million, $8 million. These are $0. If anyone, I want to put the idea out into the community. If you are in dire need of clean water, I'm realizing not many people are aware of this article. It's been implemented and proven scientifically, and very few people are aware of it. So if there is a concern about the cost of water and sewage, there are compost techniques for sewage in the event of an emergency that cost effectively $0. There's a way to use, especially in combination, tree branches and clay pots that use sawdust temper that is burned away and leaves thousands of tiny holes that form a filtration system that's also effective against bacteria. If there's any viral concerns about waterborne viruses, just boiling the water is effective. So just wanted to put that out there. It doesn't directly pertain to the presentation, but I think everyone on Earth should basically know about this at this point. It's $0. So I know it's a complicated presentation, complicated issue, but that's where my thinking goes on these things. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any more public comments? Public comments? I'll bring it back up to the board. Item 8.
James Lack, Sutton. There wasn't a whole lot there that I understood. Seems like it's the first time I've heard it, I propose we pass on agenda item B tonight and bring it up again at a later date after people have had a chance to read it, study it, think about it, think what we need and what we don't need on there. Believe we should probably have a public hearing before the board votes on it. Give the people a real chance to discuss it with you, not just tell you our thoughts on it or you tell us yours. It'd be nice to have a discussion, have a good public hearing on it. I propose we pass on this till a month from now, have a public hearing, then bring it up again after. You had a year and a half to put this together. You've been promising to give us this information. At least give us a couple of months to digest this information and see what's needed, so we don't feel like, we're being ripped off. Give us a chance. Thank you.
Hello, Janice Young. In case anybody forgot, in 2023, you guys already increased our water rates. The RTS fees for the water went up 8.5%, sewer went up 5.9%, sprinklers went up 8.5%. The water rate went up 8.6%, sewers went up 5.8%, and sprinklers went up 8.4%. That was just 2 years ago. So you already hit us on that. Now you're looking at 10.5% on the RTS on water, 17% for sewer, and a whopping 203% increase for sprinkler RTS. So that's wonderful for the 4,000 people that have sprinklers. That's going to be a pretty heavy increase. So the gentleman said it would be $22.48 minimum increase for residents. That's if you don't have sprinklers. If you do, it's $41.61. So it is a little bit more than that if you have sprinklers, which I do. So I'm a little sensitive to that. The sprinklers were there, the meter was there when I bought the house, so it's not like I have a choice. And honestly, I just think that your spending has been reckless. I have been vocal about this the whole time. The bonds, all the money you spent on the sewer lines, all that crap. You didn't have to do it. The money you spent on the school, you didn't have to do that. You had $5 million you could have put towards anything, and you bought this. And it's like, you could have did something more constructive with our money, and you chose not to. And now we're on the hook for it, and you want to make us all pay for it. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Item 8, the consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of June 10th, 2025. B, approve a request by the Streets, Sidewalks and Pathways Committee to pay invoice number 1388 from TC Tree Service in the amount of $8,900 for the removal of a row of willow trees and cottonwoods along the property line where the Jefferson Pathway project will be. C, request that the Township Board authorize Supervisor Kersten to execute the Metro Act right-of-way permit extension for AT&T Michigan. This permit extension is for a term ending on October 31st, 2029. And D, approval of the bills as submitted by the Finance Department and the supplemental payroll register report, which has been presented to the board members.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Trustee Vosberg. Discussion? Clerk Berry. Motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Trustee Vosberg. Clerk Berry. Call the roll.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Hornberger. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye. Item 9A, there's a public hearing scheduled tonight. Item 9A, Clerk Berry, when you're ready.
Item 9A is to hold a public hearing of necessity for the proposed 23-mile sidewalk gap project along 23 Mile Road between Colonial Club Drive and the westbound I-94 off-ramp.
Is there a motion to open the public hearing? So moved. Motion by Trustee Joseph, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Supervisor Kersten. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Hornberger. Aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry. Aye.
Public hearing's open at 7:42. Mr. O'Connor?
Good evening. This public hearing was scheduled two board meetings ago. It's for the sidewalk on the north side of 23 Mile Road from I-94 west of the Colonial Club apartments.
Comments or questions from the board? Questions from the public? This is a public hearing. Seeing no public comments, any comments from the board members? We'll bring it back up to the board. Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second by Clerk Berry. Clerk Berry, call the roll. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I've got 7:43.
Yep.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Hornberger. Aye. Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
7:43. Item 10, the regular agenda. Item 10A.
Item 10A is to approve a request by the Department of Public Services to adopt Resolution Number 2025-16, approving a pass-through water and sewer rate increase and approving a restructuring of water and sewer rates effective July 1, 2025.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve. Is there any support? Support. Trustee Joseph. Did we get that out of order? Yeah. Yeah. There, I think that was 10A. Went to 10B.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yep.
We're on 10-8.
Yes, yes.
Regarding 23 Mile
Yes. Yes.
That's what my support of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
motion was.
So let's go back to regular agenda 10A. Clerk Berry.
10A is to approve a recommendation from the Sidewalks, Streets and Pathways Committee to award the contract for the 23-mile sidewalk gap project to Stafford Landscaping as the lowest responsible bidder in the amount of $63,493.75, with a total project cost of $82,859.35.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Trustee Vosberg. Supported by Trustee Joseph. Mr. O'Connor.
Good evening. This is the project we just closed the public hearing on. Stafford's the low bidder. They're the same contractor that's doing the replacement program this year. And Phil Strunk with Spalding is here to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Seeing no questions from the board, I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Trustee Joseph, to approve item 10A. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Hornberger. Aye. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 10B.
Item 10B, approve a request by the Department of Public Services to adopt resolution number 2025-16, approving a pass-through water and sewer rate increase and approving a restructuring of water and sewer rates effective July 1, 2025.
Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to approve. Is there any support?
Support.
Trustee Vosberg. So, again, this is the. Correct.
I'm not sure what we have procedurally. I think we might have something. Your deputy is.
I still got, it's still 10B. We're on the right number.
Approve a request to adopt resolution number 2025-16. Approving a pass-through.
We've got the same thing.
Same thing.
Yep. It is the same thing.
It is the same.
Yes, it is the same.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you. Again, this is a request for, it's been over a year, where we engaged HRC to not only take a look at our rate studies tonight, we're just presenting the increase pass-through, rate increase, and then there's some backroom work that still needs to be done. And Mr., do you want to address some of the, maybe some questions that may come up now? This literally is just the pass-through, and the financials that were presented, we have to continue, or at least invest in our capital plan and continue to replace water mains and sewer mains throughout the township. And as was pointed out, we have greatly expanded that responsibility on us to invest in the network in the system. If you remember sometime last meeting when Mr. O'Connor came up, we've got pipes in the ground, water and sewer, that are 70-plus years old that are becoming problematic and need to be addressed. And that's on the capital side. This here tonight is just the GLWA and the mid pass-throughs that kind of restructure how we, moving forward, can better plan both budgetarily and then functionally internally. Did I miss anything, Jamie? Kind of high level?
No, while you were talking, I scrolled back to what makes up so that these are the 4 categories that are being increased, plus the $4. So I just want to put this on the board, so when people, if I ask questions specifically to these, I can respond specific to those.
Okay. With that being said, questions from the board? All yours.
Yeah, I'll start off. I have a bunch, but before we'll start with the slide that you have there. We heard residents that talked about, and when they reviewed the packet, they came with some of the same numbers that I came to. This does not reflect the increase for the sprinkler customers.
That's correct. So if I go to here, increase residential customers, and then commercial, and then irrigation lines, but irrigation for residential are 1 RTS. So the 42, we went to the back and went through that. So if you have a sprinkler line, and those are residential, those are commercial, that is multifamily, that's a bunch of different people with 4,000, then you have to include the irrigation line. If you happen to be a home with a fire line, which there are probably none, you would have to add that cost in there as well.
So the comment regarding a resident who has a sprinkler line, their increase would be closer to the $41 as opposed to the slide that you had previously here,
Correct.
which addressed those 4 areas. Fair?
Correct, fair.
Okay. So the history of the RTS, if you will, we'll start there. We're going back about 12 years, but we did form a Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Committee under then Supervisor Lovelock. The proposal at the time was a rate increase of roughly 50% over a 5-year period. And what we commissioned was a group of residents, and some very, very knowledgeable. Some had tremendous experience in the industry. We met with our DPW head at the time, and we answered a lot of things, and we worked through a lot of things. But what we agreed upon is that we couldn't, similar to the situation we're in now. Then it was Detroit Water and Sewerage, but now Great Lakes Water. They raised the rate. No matter what debates you may have, you're going to pay additional monies for that water based on the rate increases. Same with the mid, which handles the drains. There's no disagreement there. The problem became, and this is just a quick historical, but the problem became when they would increase rates, we would increase rates accordingly. But what we found in our water and sewer rate, there was a lot of money that was not directly tied to the water and the sewer as a commodity. It had to do with depreciation and other things. So we structured our bill to incorporate all of the things that weren't necessarily rate increases. So when they would raise rates and we would raise rates the exact same amount, we were actually overbilling our, there was no additional cost to get the water to us. It was just the water. So what we did is we modified the agreement that we adopted then was an increase pass-through, a true pass-through that just reflected water and sewer increases. And that we put on the RTS. That was how we've been managing that. But that was supposed to be a short-term fix, and it's been almost, well, over a decade that we've adopted that. And our RTS now, if you could break it down a little bit, what are, when the resident sees, and at the time that we formed this, we actually had a resident that came forward, I don't know if she was a retired math teacher, but she did her bill, and she looked at all of the gallons of water that she consumed, and she checked her meter. She couldn't account for the $5. She just couldn't figure out why she had, and he said, well, that's your RTS. The presentation at the time I don't think has changed much, but maybe if you could just explain what is on an RTS. What is the RTS fee associated with?
So I can't speak to what happened 12 years ago and the premise behind it. So let me
just to clarify the question, what would you classify the RTS to comprise currently?
Currently, a portion of your fixed fees.
Okay.
To you.
Could you break down a couple of the fixed fees? The one I'm going for is depreciation. That's the.
Depreciation is not included anywhere in this analysis. Depreciation is not a cash basis. It's a financial statement basis on depreciation, and typically on cash-based rates, you do not include depreciation at all.
How do you account for capital improvements in your rate structure if you don't categorize depreciation as a known cost?
I add the CIP. In the sheet that.
No, I understand the capital improvement plan, but that's an estimate of what you intend to replace.
No. That's an estimate of what the system devalues over straight line depreciation of those assets.
How do you know when it's time to replace a pipe? When it breaks?
No, if it were up to me, you'd be on a systematic capital plan to replace or to line your sewers as
How
you
would
move
you
forward.
how would you structure the revenue to cover those costs?
I would charge exactly what we're talking about. It would be in the RTS charge. It would be through a budget process.
Okay?
That's a capital plan, because you wouldn't do it all in 1 year. You'd do it over time.
So
And you would generate enough revenue to cover that replacement program.
that's what you would do now.
Yeah.
What's your assessment of what the township has done before you and your firm showed up to put us on the straight and narrow? Because I tell you that there was a plan in place to collect for what we knew to be depreciating assets. We know that a life expectancy of a pipe is, say, 50 years. You would be foolish to not structure your bill to account for the repair of that pipe within the next 50 years, correct?
So when you
So
look,
what's, from your assessment, how has the township collected enough money to keep the system in good repair?
because you haven't done enough repair.
Clearly. I agree with you there.
You're way behind on your repairs. And so when,
Are you saying that we haven't collected anything? We haven't set anything
No.
aside for that?
no. So
What was the mechanism for the set aside for that?
The rates and what you charge per year and then your debt service. If you look at the
Okay.
last 3, 4, pick a number, of your audited financial statements showing the cash needs, you will see in there the cash generated, 16 million, 17 million, with other fees and interest and penalties. And then beneath that, there's capital and there's debt service, and all of those expenses come right out of it. So if you had $1 million capital plan, you took it right straight out of that 16 million, 17 million that you were collecting.
You wouldn't, you're saying that the township, based on your assessment, the township has never structured a bill to take into account the depreciation of the underground asset and the cost associated with keeping that in like minimal standard repair, that it gets the water in and the sewage out. We haven't had any basis for how we collect that in your estimate?
I have not seen a direct line until we started talking in this last process of your capital needs for replacement to a rate, into a rate structure. I've seen you set up these RTS and the fees and the pass-through a few years, 2023, and a pass-through, I think, in 18 or 19 was the previous one.
I'm actually going back probably closer to 2013, when
Right.
the RTS was $5, and now it's 4 times that. So those have been reflective
Right.
of the pass-throughs. That has been loosely how the RTS has crept up.
I'll focus on the word loosely. You've collected the money and you've spent it in certain
I
necessary
haven't got
needs.
there yet. I haven't got there
Right.
yet.
So,
I'm
but-
just trying to find out from you, you're the expert.
Yep.
What did we base an RTS on?
Magic. And that's probably going to get me in the paper as a quote. You collected the rates. When I saw the pass-through rates, it had no bearing on how you were being charged or assessed by your folks. The fixed fees are like 5 years old, not 12 years old. So the RTS conversation 12 years ago and the RTS conversation today are materially different.
They have
by
a
your
bill, they have a bill, residents have a bill, it says RTS,
I understand
correct?
that, but what you're paying and how we're going to collect or recommended to collect out of that are materially different than 2012. I think you've set your rates up and you collected the 16 million and it's worked for you on a base level. If you spend 16 to 17 million, you're doing okay. If you look at your last couple of years of financials, you sell a bond and then you use the project in and out, and you're floating through there. But now that you're doing additional capital and you have $1 million of pass-through, and you had probably $500,000 of pass-through from between the rate increase in 2013 and today, yeah, you're using your fund balance and you're floating. Is my honest professional opinion. You've been floating on that, and if you had done $5 million of capital, you would have $5 million less in your account, or you would have to sell $5 more million in debt.
Well, some of the criticism, and I can see, I understand completely when I talked to Trustee Anderson after he met with you, there's a certain like animosity that seems to permeate from you. I noticed a bit of it when I started talking to you about depreciation, because you jumped immediately to this, clearly that's not a entry that you're familiar with or aware of, but that was certainly part of the rate structure when I was elected here, and when we started dissecting the last round of experts that came in and said, and by the way, even 12 years ago, when we started to focus on this, the capital improvements at that time weren't 7 million. They ballooned up to somewhere around 40 million. That we could spend 40 million and, you know, get the system to the appropriate level. So you've done a great job in extracting like 32 million out of that from, you know, but I think the fluidness is in those numbers. And at that time, what we were told from the experts is that your RTS takes into account some fixed costs. The number that you hear residents to come to the podium that were part of that committee, and they assert that somewhere there's $12 million missing. I understand their frustration. And the line of thinking on that is that they were told, and those in the know that came to these meetings and understood like their bill, even the lady that processed it down to figure out why the $5 was there after she subtracted her water, the problem was that there was money collected, in theory, for system upgrades and system improvements, what you're now calling the capital improvement plan. That money was never, ever consistent with what was being sort of charged for that line item. So you can't find it because it doesn't exist. I'm not charging that you're false there. There isn't. Sure. But the residents were told, and the ones that keep coming to say what happened to this money, that you set up the RTS to take into account that any system has a life expectancy, and at the end of that life expectancy, hopefully before there's an emergency, you repair it. And so that fund, which again gets blended into what's not commonly called the enterprise fund, we just pay for things historically. We pay for things as they break, and the cost to repair those things is typically much higher than if you had a coherent capital improvement plan and you did them on a regular basis before they failed. Yep. So I appreciate, you know, like at least getting on the path of looking at what we anticipate need to be repaired in an urgent basis before it gets an emergency, which leads me to the next.
Can I make a couple comments?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so no, I don't have animosity towards the conversation of depreciation. It's just a conversation that we've had with this township board since 18 in the connection fee study. It consistently comes up, and I just want to. I struggle with the idea that this depreciation generated any revenue. You can look at your audited financial statements. There's not a magic $16 million. Okay. Depreciation.
Just so you know, I agree with you there.
Yeah, so
I don't have that.
Yeah. So I'm not animosity towards it, but I think that when you take a step back for sake of discussion, I'll agree with everything you just said. So you have a revenue need that someone generated, the pie, and said we're going to account for depreciation. I can say we're going to account for parking spots. I can capital, pick a number. It's part of how much money do you think we need. Let's say they included depreciation. So they collected that depreciation. That depreciation still only resulted in a $16 to $17 million utility collection per year, whatever the RTS was in component, the part of the RTS that was quote unquote for the depreciation. So as that has gone on, so where is that money? Let me jump to that. So that money you collected for depreciation, you can collect for anything. You collected for it, but over the years, as mentioned, every year you've seen 4, 5, 7% increases from your service providers. You've done some capital repairs with cash over the time. You've made debt service payments. And so that, let's say you tried to collect $2 million in depreciation. You've spent it on kind of capital projects, whether that's bond payments, because you don't have a bond line item on your bill. So bond payment. You did it for paying Detroit more. If you haven't increased your rate since 2023, then 2024, you saw probably $500,000 of 100% fixed costs that you didn't collect. So if you were collecting for depreciation, you just spent $500,000 of that number. So I think there is elements of the depreciation that went to capital because you still did some projects, even though they weren't part of a debt service or part of the capital. You still did some of that. You've absorbed all these other increases along the way. So whether we collected for depreciation or not, I look at it, you collected $3 million was a number back I saw in some report, or $2.5 million. If someone said, we're collecting that for depreciation, well, you used it in the system. It didn't go anywhere else, but you just didn't use it necessarily for that item. And you wouldn't necessarily have a perfect, well, actually, let me back up. We're kind of proposing kind of a perfect line item. Here's the debt, here's the number, right? And that's only a portion of the debt. Here's the capital, here's the number. So it's a little more transparent. But the RTS and the commodity rate have been blended for those years to cover all expenses within the utility, right? So they've been really blended in that. So I don't discourage that, but I also, the depreciation, and it's not just you, all of the depreciation expense. I understand that. To me, that's a basis for a capital improvement plan. If you're losing $3 million of straight line value of your system, you should probably be putting $3 million into it to maintain it. But from this analysis and what's included in the RTS right now is what was included in it before plus the $2 for the pass-through of the fixed fees. And the RTS is materially different from 12 years ago. The fixed fees are in that way. So, yeah, we can.
No, I appreciate.
So I'm with you on a lot of those.
I appreciate the clarification, and my line of questioning was I was really trying to pin you down on what the percentage of the RTS went to so that we could have a number. But I like the way that you categorized it, which is it's arbitrary. If it's 1 million, if it's 2 million, it went to other capital improvement issues. But here's the issue that I think raises a lot of concern for the residents that come forward. They have a fixed number. You referenced it. It was 3 million, and then they just simply do the math and 3 million over this, and then you subtract the actual capital improvement, and you go, where's the rest? Where's the rest? Yeah. I understand the logic there. The problem is it's gotten legs now, and we've actually had residents that come forward and go, well, we should have the FBI and the Attorney General and accounting because somebody ran away with 12 million. I don't think in any stretch that there's that kind of, but where I do think that there is room for discussion is, as you said, if you know that you have whatever the number is, $150 million in underground assets, and it has a life expectancy, and you arrive at a depreciation that you should be collecting, say in the neighborhood of 2 million, and you only spend consistently 300,000 on a project, what's the leftover go? And that's the dilemma that we're in now. And when you say, well, it went to others and there are increased costs and there are but there's also some other things that have happened over the years that residents have come forward and say, if the Department of Public Works looks a lot like the facilities in operation and the Department of Public Service, and we have all kinds of projects involving those trucks that are paid out of the enterprise fund, say over at Brandenburg, working on a shoreline project, and they say you're now commingling, you're taking the money that you collected under the pretense of water, sewer, depreciation, RTS, and you're spending it on a fish habitat or a park or a this. And so it's not going to disappear from the accounting ledgers as if somebody just walked off with millions, but I don't think that we have a tight enough understanding of what is only to be used as water and sewer monies, and maybe this billing system puts us on that path, and it does have a tighter accounting, but I think there's also some internal controls, including the use of BS&A, which we spent a tremendous amount of money on to itemize who does what and what pile of money, what line item does it come out of. And I don't know that we're there yet. And I'm troubled with, I know that it needs to be fixed, and I appreciate it, and I don't want to argue with you, but I recognize the path that we're on is a much better path, and I would agree with you that it looks a lot like magic as well. So if they're quoted, then we'll both be quoted, because it does need to be corrected, and we knew that when we put the proposal together for the board 12 years ago.
Can I make a couple comments?
And I'll shut up and turn it over to the rest of the board.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I like your train of thought, and that's why in 2021 we undertook the first half of this process of what is the actual cost of service. We mapped to the dollar all expenses for a number of years, and we've updated that since. So if anybody asks how we get to 17 million or whatever, and that then lines up the financial statements, because of accounts receivable and all that, depreciation, those are different. But if you look at the cash, we can generally match that and show you where every dollar was spent. That's the pie chart that was up there. So I think that should provide some level of comfort that there is, at minimum, a tracking system to understand where that went. Now, the second half of your statement was, well, what if it's still, I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but if it's being tracked but it's being spent elsewhere? Well, that to me should be an absolute conversation of the Township Board, and that's why we're recommending this go within the budget process. So if you were to split those costs, you could split those costs. We did analysis on how much cost was going in water and sewer. I've got it somewhere, but for your cost, everything else is broken down. You continue to update that, and I think there is some controls, and I'm always a proponent of optimizing and efficiencies of the water and sewer system. I don't think those go materially different than to take GLWAs and push forward. But I think that is an underpinning of our conversations that we've had to put this on the budget cycle so we can have the conversation about FTEs, splitting FTEs, equipment, capital purchases, et cetera. That way we're not splitting this up by 6 months and then going, wait a minute. So one, I can assure you we've tracked those dollars. Now, yeah, if it went to here or there, I know where it went, but the bottom line is those other conversations about how many FTEs should we designate to, so this department, that department, this truck, is always a question that I think warrants the ongoing conversation. I just caution you to not jump to something that's 0.0004% of the over 17 million and start with the big ones.
No, fair enough.
And I just have money. So
one last question, and I know,
Yep.
if you don't know the answer, it's okay, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. If we moved the balance of my concern, which is, you put words in my mouth, they were great. The budget process could flush a lot of those out. What would be the cost, roughly, if we didn't institute the proposed rate increases now, and we did everything during the budget process? What do you think that number would be in terms of the cost of the enterprise fund? So if we wait until the budget process and we approve this as part of the budget process, what do you anticipate being the debit from the enterprise fund to as a cost of waiting until we had the budget process? What do you think that number would be?
I'll direct you up to here. So absent in the timing of some of these things, but if you consider that to be 6 months of the GLWA increase, right? 6 months or half of the Great Lakes Mid increase, potentially half of the increase in the sewer debt depending on when principal and interest payments are due, and then whatever you spent out of capital at the remainder of this year for the Jefferson water main or whatever has no current revenue source to offset that. So you'd look, so if you spend $1 million, it's not half of that, it's half of the top
Sure.
3 items
Sure.
and whatever you spend on capital and whatever else comes up. So you're $1 million, $1 million, $1.2 million, $1.3 million.
We in theory, we owe that in terms of what it costs to do business, regardless. Whether we pay it now or roll that in, I would personally just be much more comfortable having this discussion during the budget time. And I think that there could be even additional savings when we get to the efficiencies part. So that's appreciate your indulgence and patience from my fellow board members.
Any further questions from the board? Any further questions from the board? Treasurer Elliott?
So at the beginning, when Clerk Barry, when you what are we actually voting on? So is it the original agenda, I think, said the addition of approving a restructuring of the water and sewer rates, but this agenda item does not say that, correct?
The agenda item doesn't say that, but the resolution number 2025-16 references it. It does say at the end of the resolution that, and I'll read it here, all rate, it's under number 15 on page 6, all charges and rates set forth in Chapter 64 of the Chesterfield Code of Ordinances that are not modified by this resolution shall remain in full force and effect. So, that portion is in there, but as far as the motion goes, I thought it was just described in the language of the resolution that the restructuring that Jamie had talked about as he pointed out in his original presentation, is there needs to be an ordinance change in order for some of those things to take place. So my interpretation was that this number 15 in the resolution addressed that. However, if the board is more comfortable, or the motion maker is more comfortable in changing it just to say the rate increase and leave that portion out, we can modify that.
I'm gonna have to ask Bob the clarity and Jamie the clarity, but the intent is to pass through the GLWA and mid increases along with creating the language and the framework structure change for the ordinance change, which will then follow up on this. So there are two separate issues. Am I off base?
No, don't get hung up on the exact language in the agenda. The agenda is not a legal requirement. The agenda is simply to give people notice of what sorts of issues the board's going to address. I don't think there's any question that the issue that's before the board is whether or not the board is going to adopt this resolution 2025-16, which contains in it certain rate increases, and I think there's a rate decrease in one or two instances. And I've spoken to Jamie about this over the course of the last day or two, and he has assured me that all of the rates that are in the resolution are rates that are in the current ordinance. We went over that yesterday afternoon, so that there are no new rates in this ordinance. This is simply an adjustment of existing rates. What he is referring to with respect to future ordinance amendments there are some additional charges that the Public Service Department would like to impose at a future date. That will require an ordinance amendment. The board cannot, by resolution, change an ordinance. You change an ordinance by an ordinance. So those are not included in here. These are simply adjustments of existing rates that are already contained in your ordinance. So, as I understand it, you're voting on the resolution that's before you.
And to clarify, not in the resolution is the per bill charge and the fire line charge, because those are not explicit in the ordinance, and that would require the ordinance amendment. The rest of them are components of your ordinance.
Correct.
Commodity and RTS and debt service and everything.
And that would encompass drafting, sitting with Bob, bringing back an ordinance to the board for approval that fits this structure.
And then
Trustee Anderson. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. The multiplier that you're using here is different than the multiplier that we used in 2023 in that ordinance.
So, is it in the ordinance or is it in my presentation? So the intent.
Yes, the 2025 ordinance that's attached has, if you want to go back to the multiplier. All right, and then if we look at the 2023 ordinance, the multiplier is different. And so with that change, as I was running some samples today, would decrease rates for your commercial based on this proposal.
So it is the intent, and I know there was a scramble. It is the intent to use the current ordinance RTS schedule. If I put the wrong one on my presentation or not, you have an existing RTS table that is used, and I thought I grabbed it right out of the ordinance here on my presentation. If it's been modified, then my apologies. The analysis is based on using the existing RTS schedule, which is basically one dwelling unit or one RTS per residential, including residential sprinklers, and then commercial or non-residential would go down to the chart that's in the ordinance. If that is not right in the resolution, my apologies, but that is our intent, so therefore there would be no change except for the rate change, not the table. We're not changing the table with this resolution. That's my understanding.
So in 2023, right? It was 5/8 was your one, and then 3/4 was 1.5. 1 inch was 2.5. 1.5 was 5.5. 2 inches was 8. Those were the multipliers versus the one that we're comparing here. So it has a significant change. I think there was something maybe that was talked about differently? Mitch is coming up to acknowledge, yes?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to find
Yeah.
the ordinance here too.
Yeah, this is the 2023 ordinance, our last one.
Did you hear my squeaking boots?
I heard your squeaking boots. I'm trying to find the ordinance. So again, I'll let Mitch comment on the changes. It is our intent to keep the RTS schedule as it exists in the current ordinance today. So if you were a commercial and you're being charged 5.2, it would be 5.2 times the new RTS. It is not our intent to change the RTS schedule at all. So I want to make sure, whatever confusion that was, or Mitch, if you understand, I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, the 2023 RTS table was based on a 5/8 meter was set as the one. Then anything bigger than that was multiplied by the 5/8 ratio. That's been changed to a 3/4. Most of our meters are 3/4 inch meters. If we have, let's just say 20,000 meters out there, 15,000 of them are 3/4 inch. So that really is the standard meter. So it's, the one has been adjusted to the 3/4 inch, and then all the other meters were changed. That is what the difference is.
And that's what we're keeping, the 3/4, right, Mitch? Yeah.
So you're keeping the 3/4 at?
1.
At 1, which is what you have up here. And the 1 inch will go down from 2.5 to 1.7, the multiplier?
Yeah, when the 5/8 inch was set as the one, is the basis for all the other meters, then everything above the 5/8 was, increased mathematically. And the increase is based on how much water can go through a 5/8 inch meter versus a 1 inch meter. So that's what those ratios are. The 3/4 inch though is our most common meter. So between 2023 and 2025, the equivalent meter ratio was changed from the 5/8 meter set at 1 to the 3/4 inch meter set at 1.
That's in the ordinance now?
Just a point of clarification, to speak to Treasurer Elliott's question, the rate, independent of 5/8 is the standard of it is what the ordinance is. We're collecting based on what the ordinance allows us to collect. So if it's changed, it's problematic, to her point.
So the multiplier effects are current, so what you'll have is when we ran some of the commercial car washes, their bills are gonna go down where residents are going up.
If I understood his answer to your question, the intent was to stay at the same table, and the initial explanation was, I may have grabbed the wrong table, but the intent is to stay, and all of his calculations are based on the 2023 tables. What I'm hearing Mitch say is, no, we changed that because of the formula having to do with 5/8 to 3/4, but I don't think that that's, I don't think that we could sort of change that ad hoc. I think we can only collect what the ordinance permits us to collect. So whatever is on the ordinance is the collection, and if it changes, you could have different collection, as Treasurer Elliott pointed out, you could have different commercial collection rates.
Oh. So Mitch and I were looking into this. So the schedule of fees adopted annually by the Township Board, and I'm trying to find this ordinance up here, is the table that is shown here. Our analysis is based on this here. If somebody was to your point, Elliott, we're not proposing that change. If that change has not been memorialized within the ordinance, then we can memorialize that with the other ordinance changes to make sure that that's cleaned up. I'm looking at, our analysis is based on what's on the table, and there's the ordinance reference there. If that was modified or used in the rate table for the rates, the resolution in budget setting, then we'd have to look at that. I think I'm trying to find it.
Treasurer Elliott, I think your point is, if you're basing all of the numeric data, you know, the financial data on a rate schedule that isn't a rate schedule that's currently within our ordinance, your numbers are going to be horrifically skewed.
Correct.
So,
I,
just
yeah, I
for
do have
clarity,
another.
what I'll do is I'll amend my motion to approve with using the 2023 existing rate schedule, and we'll clean up the resolution with the proper language and using the right table.
Mr. Supervisor, if I could, just to that point.
Yep.
Well, I'll wait for continued support before I.
Trustee Bosberg, will you support that still?
I'm not sure. Is your new proposed motion what we have been presented here tonight? And what has been presented in any work groups?
Yes, the resolution will just have to reflect the rate table that is within the ordinance that Mr. Burton is referring to. We would add that for clarity to the resolution.
Does that take care of
So,
the issue that's being?
so we should continue to bill. There's a secondary conversation to this. How are these folks being billed today, right? Considering that this is a 6-month window and there's going to be additional changes in that, we're not attempting to collect any of the overall deficit. We're only trying to make a start to that deficit over the 6 months. So I don't have a concern. I think we should continue. My concern is not, I'm going to say this carefully. My concern is not necessarily what's in the ordinance or what's in this resolution. My concern is how are people being billed and what's the difference they're going to see. So I was looking up the schedule, the rate table and whatnot. So we can make sure that that is all crystal clear. It will make a difference, obviously, in the total number of RTSs that are out there. But again, we're not trying to be perfect in this first 6-month window. We're trying to close the gap. Okay? So we can have that fixed. And actually, probably, you know, in a month. To be honest, I am trying to figure out where this fits exactly, and I will continue to look at that.
Trustee Bosberg. Trustee Bosberg. I'm making a motion, and I have made the motion, just to continue with the pass-through with the rate table used in 2023, which is existing in our ordinance today.
So in other words, the way it has been billed, and the increases will be built off the way it has been currently being billed.
Correct.
I would support that.
Mr. Supervisor, just full disclosure, I'm a no on this no matter how long we're here tonight for a multitude of reasons. But the one that I want you to hear is the presentation that was given to us gave us certain projections and certain dollar amounts, certain recovery rates and the costs. And I even asked the follow-up question, which was a slide that had roughly $2.1 million in additional revenue should we adopt the proposed changes. I would say to you at this point, if the catch that Treasurer Elliott makes and draws the attention to which was the rate schedule here is different than the ordinance, and that she processed some accounts and found a reduction, I would argue that there's a very good likelihood that the numbers that were presented to us may be skewed and may not be accurate in terms of what the formulations are if we're using what our expert said. I thought I grabbed them off the chart, and they were exactly like 2023. They're not. They're not. That's clear. They're not. And Mitch seems to be putting forward an argument that says, well, we modified that, and you can't modify that. So I think it would be at least wise to, this problem's been with us for a long, long time. I would motion that we at least table it for a month and let the presentation include numbers that we can all agree on are based in our ordinance. So I would like to make a motion to postpone 1 month and see the actual numbers as they relate to the 2023 ordinance.
there any support for his motion to postpone? Support. Motion by trustee Joseph, supported by trustee Anderson to postpone to a date certain.
I would defer to the expert if he can bring it back in a month. We could bring it back in the second meeting in July, would be my proposal.
July 8th.
That would be July 22nd is the second meeting in
Yes.
July.
Yeah, July 22nd.
That would be the date, yes.
Enough time, Mr. Burton?
Absolutely. So we're seeing where I pulled the numbers. Those are the numbers up there. So we will reconcile that. I think that's a great thing. What I would ask is that if we are postponing a month, therefore not collecting the increase in fees, if there's any direction from the board to Bob and myself and Mitch and team to work on those ordinance resolutions at the same time so that you have the entire package in front of you, would
Yeah, I
that be
think that's great.
sufficient?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Would there require board action? Like whatever the presentation is, if it's inclusive of, that would be great, but I don't know that board action is
No,
necessary.
I don't think that's required. I think what you need to do tonight is, as I said before, the only thing you can do by resolution is to change the numerical rates in the ordinance. You cannot make a text change to the ordinance by resolution. And to the extent that those tables may have clerical error, they weren't transposed properly, you cannot approve those by resolution. So that's a non-starter. You can't do that. But if you are going to wait a month, and there are these other two ordinance amendments for new fees that at least are going to be proposed to be charged, I then would get with Jamie and get with Mitch and their team and sit down, and I'll draft the ordinance amendment language and bring it back. If you don't want the new rates, don't approve the ordinance. But you can at least then take a look at these rates again with a correct chart.
Great.
So motion to postpone till July 22nd?
That's my motion, yes.
Jamie, is that?
Yes, fine. Yeah,
Burton?
yes.
Any other questions from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
So I understand, I have no problem with waiting to get numbers that everyone is agreeing, those are using the proper numbers to make our calculations. However, I think there's value in continuing our discussion just for the concept.
Point of
that's being-
clarification, there's a motion to postpone. There is no debate on a motion to postpone, trustee Vosberg.
It's not postponed, you said table.
I made a motion to postpone. It's been
You said
seconded.
table.
I was asked for a date
Motion
specific,
was to
and I gave a
postpone.
date specific. The motion is to
Motion
postpone.
was to postpone. I did check in our board rules, so.
So there's no
said
debate on
table.
that?
You said table. Well,
Okay, well, it's a friendly amendment to myself. It's a motion to postpone. Supervisor understood it. He chairs the board. There's a
I'm-
second.
I made a motion. There's a motion to postpone. Trustee Joseph made a motion. Trustee Anderson has seconded. Postpone to date certain July 22nd. Any further questions from the board?
can I may have,
Trustee Vosberg, yeah.
he asked, is there any more? I'm just responding to the chair's
The chair,
request.
the chair's not right. There's no debate on a motion to postpone, and you
My
know that.
point- Look, I just want to, I think there's
I
value in
appreciate that
term-
you just want to, but there's no debate on a motion to postpone, and you know that. You
Motion
know
by-
that.
Motion by trustee Joseph, supported by trustee Anderson to postpone this until July 22nd. Clerk Berry. 28th, I'm sorry. 28th.
28th or 22nd? 22nd.
It's the 22nd.
22nd? The 22nd.
First meeting's on the
Clerk.
8th, second's on the 22nd.
Yep. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Joseph, on the motion to postpone.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Hornberger. Trustee Vosberg.
No.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kersten.
No.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 10C.
Item 10C is to authorize the township attorney to institute circuit court action regarding 50120 Spruce, violations of Township Code of Ordinances, blight.
So moved.
Motion by trustee Joseph, supported by Supervisor Kersten. Gentlemen?
All right, we have a resident who decided to build a shed in his front yard. We caught it early. And we actually sent Dave out immediately to stop him, to tell him, you need a permit, you can't build it in the front yard. He basically said, I don't care, built it anyway. And so we went through the process of district court. Then in district court, he was told, go to the ZBA, that's the only way you can have it in the front yard. He was denied by the ZBA. Then he went back to court for a jury trial where he pled guilty. And so this is the next process. I mean, we can't just, as a township, go tear it down with a court order. But it is right in the front yard, and it doesn't belong there. And
Questions from the board? Seeing no questions from the board, I have a motion by trustee Joseph, supported by supervisor Kersten, to approve item 10C. Clerk Barry?
Trustee Joseph. Supervisor Kersten. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Hornberger. Trustee Vosberg. Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Barry, aye.
thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 11 is addendums. There are none. Item 12, public comments. There is a 3-minute time limit. If you would please state your name for the record. It is not required. Mic is open.
There we go. My name is Benjamin. I live on D.W. Seaton in Chesterfield. I guess I would just like to relate my earlier comment somewhat to the overall discussion, which is more just to the community in general. I brought up the Massachusetts Institute of Technology study from 2015, but there are related studies on water and sewage related concerns. I know this becomes a complicated conversation about essentially entropy and degradation and depreciation and the cost of upgrading water lines and sewage lines that haven't been potentially treated in 70 years and so forth. To the community, I think we should just go ahead and assume the worst in these instances. You know, it's a very uncertain overall time right now. Assume that things like RTS fees continue to creep up to a point where you know, today it might be annoying, but let's go ahead and assume it gets to the point where you can't afford to be in the community, essentially, and you're forced out for whatever, you know, that reason or other reasons. Let's just assume that, like, the cost of living continues to be a burden. This is why I'm referring to things like what's going on in Africa or India, where they're studying the implementation of these alternative means. It's because there is really reputable science proving that there are solutions to these fundamental problems, namely water filtration and sewage, that cost essentially $0. We can quibble over things like $1 million level, you know, solutions, and I understand that there's a traditional approach to this at this point that's in place, but let's just go ahead and assume that none of this works. Like, let's go ahead and assume that some catastrophe occurs, like what happened in Flint with the degradation of pipes and the contamination of water and so forth, and people don't have the water they need. Then what do? Well, it turns out you can use water, or you can use, tree branches and clay, which I understand people laugh when I bring this up if they're used to the modern conveniences of these systems, but I'm convinced there's going to come a time, there already is a time elsewhere in the world, and even elsewhere in this state, where people are no longer worrying about these things, basically. It's like, if you have access to clay and tree branches, you can filter water. What do you do with feces and urine? Well, urine can be used as a fertilizer for plants. The feces can be used to develop compost, which can also be developed for soil to grow plants. Those are the solutions to these problems. You know, it costs $0. Scientists at the MIT level have solved this. If you're concerned with the broader economic issues, I would refer to Nicholas Georgescu-Rogan, Nobel Prize winning economist, who in the 1970s, his magnum opus was Entropy in the Economic Process, where he argued that economists in general are failing to acknowledge this fundamental issue, which is entropy, the degradation of materials, depreciation, and residents and communities are continuing to be, you know, blindsided by increased costs that are predictable for economists that are paying attention to entropy, essentially, but not so otherwise. Anyway, the point is just, there's some really simple solutions, it turns out, to these ancient problems that might not seem relevant right now, but they're relevant in Africa and India, and if what continues to
I gotta cut you off, sir.
Sure.
3 minutes, thank you. Appreciate it. Any further comments from the public?
Nancy Hutchinson, you don't even need to start your timer, I'll be quick. Wondering if you have any information or would be willing to share any about the eyesore house on Sugar Bush. I drive by it and it looks like nothing has been touched. I know it was on the agenda last meeting. I don't know if there's been anything new.
Any further comments from the public?
John Speaka, Chesterfield Township. In regards to the water and sewer rate increase discussion that took place tonight, on the topic, before there's any increases, I'd like to see the water and sewer department separated from facilities and operations. So I think water and sewer should be separate. It shouldn't be combined with any other department. So I'd like to see that in the next budget, and I think that's the right thing to do. As far as, just to give you another example, on the seniors, I was just wondering if there's a firm date when the seniors are going to go back to the community center. So, and I'd like to see the seniors as separate department. Right now they're combined with Parks and Rec. So I think the seniors should be separate like they were. And as far as the Gratiot corridor, I've commented on this several times. I think on a daily basis we should have two individuals, one going north, one going south, and taking care of any debris in the roadway, which there's quite a few out there. And then I'd like to see, and I know that discussions come up here on the car wash at 21 and a half that's been closed, and there's garbage out there. The weeds are tall. It's a complete eyesore. So again, I can't tell you how important the Gratiot corridor is. People come down, up and down that street, north and south. I think we need to start paying closer attention to that. I think it's been neglected. And, you know, we want this township to look good. We want it to look presentable. And, you know, we want to be proud of what we have. We've got a beautiful township here. But we need people that are committed to the township, that are willing to put forth the effort to get the work done. I mean, we've got plenty of people on staff. And Supervisor Kersten, it's not a big deal to send one person north, the other person south, and to make sure that it looks good. Yeah, you're only looking at almost 6 miles. It's no big deal. I mean, I've asked you before, and you've ignored it. So I live in this township. I pay taxes in this township. I'm proud of this township, and I love this township. So I want to make sure that this township looks good, and I would appreciate some cooperation on your part. So you are the supervisor currently, and you can make that happen. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Janice Young. I got a little heated earlier. All these increases just really frost my cake, and I spent a good portion of my day looking at the increases and the percentages and the tax rates. In 2021, our tax rate didn't change here. It was 0% increase. In 2022, it was 3% for summer and winter. 2023, it was 5% and 6%. In 2024, it was 5% and 4%. And on top of the water rates. You know, 3.5 years ago, I took a new job, and I negotiated my pay based on my living expenses at the time. I've had 3 decent raises. I'm not making it. There's just no more money. There's just no more money. So I get a little heated and a little excited about this stuff. But on that note, I have to cut back on spending. I expect you guys to do the same thing with my money. I can't stop you from spending it. You have to stop spending. That's just the only answer there is to it. There's just, people don't have any more money to give. John said he wants the township to look good. Well, we're not gonna be able to water our grass. I'm telling you right now. We're gonna all have dead grass because we just can't afford to water stuff. That's what's gonna happen. I already told my husband, I said, I don't care if we have brown grass. I'm done. I just can't, I'm not gonna pay to do it anymore. So, sorry for getting so excited earlier. Thanks.
I'm here tonight to address the ongoing issues surrounding the early voting at Sugarbush and bring forth the proof the clerk's office did not have authorization. I was thrown into a life of advocacy after receiving my daughter's diagnosis of level 3 nonverbal autism. I anticipated setbacks, discrimination, and judgment, just not at the local municipal level. Some would say I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but I disagree. The unnecessary risk put on a protected class of people to push this voting location through was legally and morally wrong. We've never had 9 consecutive days of early voting before the amended Michigan State Constitution of Proposal 22-2. Schools typically use a professional day, so students are not in the building on voting day. When I spoke with Cindy Berry about this issue arising with Sugarbush, she said they needed more space to allow for early voting, which is why they didn't utilize the municipality. There was a process she needed to follow. Let me remind everyone, Chesterfield Township was a leasing party to Sugarbush. Anchor Bay School District owned this building. I took issue with this because 300 unvetted residents came in and out of this building. Anchor Bay Special Education Department had several active classes along with the Macomb County GSRP program. We've all heard Cindy Berry state that there is evidence saying that she was granted approval for operating early voting through school. Before you are the documents that I have received from the clerk. A quick overview will bring you to the same conclusion I have. She had none. I have received not one single piece of evidence backing her claim that she obtained the legal approval to operate early voting at a Sugarbush, because it doesn't exist. The 2 pieces of documents before you are the other people's notes and speaking only to the purchase of Sugarbush, not early voting. Cindy, you've claimed time and time again that the proof is on your side, and I'm here tonight to show you what tangible proof looks like. You weren't given approval by the school board nor the superintendent. Your meeting in July with Phil and Todd discussed only the purchase of Sugarbush, not early voting, until after the sale of the school in August. Per an email with Todd, he stated, "We received no communication to the contrary and were surprised as anyone that the voting was held at Sugarbush. Accordingly, we did not notify parents and staff as we ourselves were unaware." End quote. You told me to watch the last school board meeting because it vindicated you. Mason's job last meeting was to go before the school board to persuade them to still do business with you. Examples of why they didn't want to work with you. You overcharged the school district for operating voting while out of their buildings that they themselves do not charge you to utilize. Your operations destroyed a function at Great Oaks Elementary, and per Ms. Berkmeyer, and I quote, "Because of past experiences and our treatment from the clerk's office, there has been no decency, and I don't have an appetite for her," end quote. And then finally, the Sugarbush issue. It seems to me that people don't enjoy working with you, for you, and I speak for myself here, being represented by you. I can no longer allow you to continue to lie on record. You were wrong then, and you're wrong now for not accepting accountability. But I have the proof.
Any more comments from the public? Any more comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board.
All right, good evening. Sorry for looking a little bit more red today. I decided to make the mistake of not wearing sunscreen going to the Fish Fly Festival, so. Which, by the way, there was a lot of good excitement there, especially with the parade. I noticed that the township did participate in that, and I was very appreciative of that. More to the point, first and foremost, wish a happy early 4th of July to the residents and hope that it will be a good holiday. And what we should take note of, how this time frame, 250 years ago, was the start of our revolution. Early days of the revolution. Last week was the 250th anniversary of the Battle of Bunker Hill, which was a real setback for the United States. But a viewpoint I have is that some days you have your Bunker Hills, but those are the days that get you to your Yorktowns. Sometimes the setbacks will get you to an eventual victory. It's a good mantra to have in life, but also it's important to take note of what they were fighting for in the past and how we can apply that for the current days in what we're dealing with today. The situation we're dealing with the local government can also be incorporated to more minute issues. And one of those I bring up today is something I have for several years brought up, and that is the critical lack of long-term sustainability of the employment in the fire department. There is a clear drain on part-time employees in the fire department, and the continuous hiring of part-timers can only be met with an eventuality of leaving the department, as it's treated as a stepping stone. Now, it'd be one thing if the township were treated as such, as it was almost like a training ground for eventual leaving of the members. They come here for a few months and then they go. But it's not. It's not advertised as that. It's advertised as a long-term situation, but people do not stay here long-term. And it's important to take note of the hardful truths of that matter. People come, they get their experience, they collect a few dollars, and then they go. It's just the nature of the beast. The reality is, though, is that there's constant amounts of money being spent to put these people through background checks, through psychological evaluations, and eventually hiring process where they don't stay long-term. And the reality is that there is a simple fix to this: to phase out part-time employees and focus on a full-time fire department with an expanded roster of individuals that can fully commit to providing the best services to the community and enthralled with the absolute actions of public service that so many of us, both on board and in the audience, have committed to in the past or are currently doing so. If that is not the full-ized commitment of this government, then it will continuously lead to just people coming on, taking their time, and then going.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Any more public comments? I'm gonna bring it back up to the board. Trustee Vosberg?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I'd just like to thank Nickolas Koziol again, the Eagle Scout, prospective Eagle Scout, on his project, and wish him well in his the process he has to finish out to attain Eagle Scout. I'd like to speak about the discussion on the water rates. And I understand that we have experienced rate increases over the years from either GLEWA or the mid, and we haven't always properly passed on that cost. And that's kind of why we were here tonight, to have a discussion on changing those rates. I'm glad that we are postponing it so that we have the proper information. I'm glad for everyone's input for various parts of this. What does disappoint me is that we couldn't just continue the discussion on the main part of what we wanted to do to try to fix it, and that was to talk about what the 6 months, do something for 6 months, or we're gonna wait and do it all on an annual basis, or would we gradually work into that? And I wish we'd had more discussion on that so that we don't have to, because next time when this comes back to us in July, we're gonna be talking about some of the same things over again. I guess that's okay, because that's how we learn, but I am disappointed, but thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Ornberg? I'm good, thanks. Trustee Anderson? One of the members present today made a remark about clandestine meetings regarding the water and sewer rate. If there were any, I wasn't invited. I highly doubt if there were any. We were, as board members, asked if we wanted to meet with a gentleman here. I did show up to see what was proposed when he fleshed it out. There was not just percentages and everything else. There's actually cash dollars attached to it, to those presentations, increases in
your meter size, things like that, what it's going to be moving forward. I'd like to see that, just besides percentages. First time I saw the presentation that was discussed was Saturday afternoon when we received the email. And I believe we owe it to our residents. You know, it might be a bitter pill to swallow, this rate, but at least should be a little more openness, not just discussing like we did tonight at the last minute. I think the public needs to know, what's really involved, and move from there. I'll keep it. And I think, Mr. Supervisor, you should really consider reinstituting the Water Sewer Rate Advisory Commission. It did very well. Mr. Joseph described it. We didn't have to pay a big consultant. I think we have the expertise between our department heads and within our community that could probably do a comparable, come up with a comparable recommendation as what we heard tonight. Thank you. Trustee Joseph?
Thanks, Mr. Supervisor. Just starting with Trustee Anderson, that Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Committee put a lot of time and energy into that, but I don't know that it would be as effective now, and primarily because of this issue regarding depreciation. And there's I think, a misconception on what was collected in the Ready to Serve and why individuals think that there was an earmarked portion of money that just has disappeared. And so it's difficult because every conversation that starts out with depreciation is like, well, from an accounting standpoint, depreciation isn't revenue, it isn't cash, and I understand that, and it would be a very difficult thing. Trustee Vosberg, I understand that you're disappointed, but honestly, I saved you about 2 hours of debate tonight because I have serious questions about the concept of this being a pass-through. It is not a pass-through in the form that I understood pass-throughs when we instituted how we were going to deal with Great Lakes or Detroit Sewer and Water or the mid increases, and that was a very calculated percentage that was added to the RTS. This changes rate structure just to some extent, and it's not simply a pass-through. It is a change, and the point that the treasurer made was slightly nuanced in that she says that the charts were not the same as the ones in 2023. The reason that was problematic for me is the expert indicated all of the calculations were based on something that Mitch then got up and said, well, we changed that because we don't really have 5/8, we have 3/4, and so there was a mathematical conversion of that. And I think that it changes the end product. I think that we should have the exact rates and it be consistent with the resolution that's before us. And there was this last-minute change. There was a revised agenda. It replaced 10A and 10B. The resolution didn't change, and the wording in the resolution didn't change, but there was a little confusion, and I think a month to get it back, and to get it back is a good a good system. So from a procedural standpoint, I think the meeting would devolved, and it would have been more problematic because there would have been issues of germane and this, and we basically agreed that we didn't have the documents that we probably should have to make a final decision. So debate on a motion to postpone was appropriately called by the chair, and there's no sense debating on something that doesn't really exist. And then lastly, I just wanted to comment, Ms. Ross, I know that this is an issue that you brought to the board several times. You've been very frustrated with your takeaway, and your evidence is pretty overwhelming. I really was frustrated myself with understanding why we needed so much space and so many employees to conduct the election. And it's something, Mr. Supervisor, that I know you're dealing with now as we prepare for the return to our home. The comment about the seniors and when will they go back, it's complicated because the seniors have home here. They have a number of programs that they think are more beneficial here, and how elections play into that, I really don't know, but I hope that we have more transparency and more honesty in terms of what's actually needed from a space and a cost standpoint, because the displacement and the impact of students that went on with the last presentation that we had, we were told that this was a must and that we must have this and we must have that space, and that the school board approved, and it turns out the school board didn't know anything about it. It looks like a kind of a rogue operation, and as we begin to move back to our newly renovated offices, let's make sure that we're appropriately spaced for the election needs, and not calculating space and manpower and expenditures that displace not only seniors and coworkers, but also special needs students and students in general. Very, very disappointing to hear that our partners at Anchor Bay, including a sitting school board member, say that there's no cooperation and no reciprocity when it comes to respect from Chesterfield Township Clerk. That's troubling, and I think when we make decisions about allocations for space and budget for elections, we should take this into account. She promised it, and she brought it, and I'm curious to see and hear what the clerk has to say, because she really did bring it. Thank you.
Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. So there, in the water and sewer rate studies, what I've been doing all day is kind of working through various samples of the different scenarios, but the samples that we were working on was based on the study documents that we had here before us. As I was going through and starting to say, okay, it looks like this is not going to be as much of an effect on residential customers as it is on commercial. Let's see exactly how it's going to affect commercial. And that's where we started to see, well, we should be able to duplicate, based on these numbers, we should be able to duplicate everything that is on a current bill. And what we were coming to find was that the bill was actually going down on the commercial, which, then I discovered that around 4 o'clock today, and contacted both Mitch and the supervisor, and to let them know, is this what you intended to do? So, and that's why we brought it up tonight. Once I get the updated numbers, we'll go through and check all of those samples again, and there is all of the various multipliers, and Trustee Joseph is correct that if you do change one number, it does affect all of the others. And so we want to check those samples and make sure that there is no outliers. And one of the outliers that I am very concerned about, and I did ask for an analysis and never did receive one, was on those who are either current or past RAP program recipients. And there are limitations in that program, although it does take some of the financial burden off of the folks. There are limitations in that RAP program. And so sometimes people fall off, but they haven't really caught up on their bills, but they fall off of the program. So now they're getting hit with bills that they can't afford. And that has been identified through the RAP program and with this increase. So I think that we should really take a look at that and analyze it and make sure that we're not overburdening anybody here in our township. The timeline for water rate increases, Trustee Joseph also said that started since they've been on the board, Trustee Joseph, Anderson, and Clerk Barry 12 years ago. But I don't think the problems started 12 years ago. You guys just kind of inherited it 12 years ago and inherited the conversation. Sounds to me like some of the issues were far before that. So you can verify that, as it goes, but I'm assuming that, that presentation was made and it was from decades of problems. And I'm glad that the rates in a lot of ways have been held back for years, but it sounds to me like we're having that time now where we have to say, okay, how are we going to approach this? The last thing that I have to say is that the township is going to be closed on Friday, July 4th, a week from this week, and I hope everybody has a good holiday. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I would be happy to take time to discuss anything that was brought up today with any member of the board. If you want to go through the information that was provided to us, all of which is public record. I don't think 3 minutes is going to be enough time to answer those questions. However, I can say this. There was nothing that was ever done inappropriately or illegally at all. All proper protocols, processes were followed. Open meetings were held for well over a year. No less than 4 members of this board were present at those meetings. The Election Commission voted unanimously to hold early voting here at this location. And since then, there has been no formal complaints made. There have been no legal actions taken by the school district. And as we had a facility use agreement in place with them for years that was current and active at the time, and they unanimously adopted it again just at a recent meeting of theirs with Anchor Bay for the use of Great Oaks Elementary. So I think it's just a lot of, it seems to me, misunderstandings perhaps, although I think there's a lot to see in there. But we are required to follow the law. We're required to do things in a particular way, and it's all public. So that's what I can tell you. I'd be happy to go over it in more detail, specifically. Maybe even Trustee Anderson might be able to answer some questions as he was there as well. Outside of that, I don't want to kind of waste any more time on that. I would like to talk a little bit about the water and sewer rate increases and just kind of give some general my thoughts on it. I didn't say anything during the item. It seemed like we were kind of getting into some detailed things there. But generally speaking, the resolution that was presented to us tonight, regardless of what its maybe material errors were, includes 7 new charges, 3 increases, 2 that stay the same, and only 1 decrease of 8 cents. So I think we can do better. I think that this is not a water and sewer problem, it's a township problem, and I think that we need to employ all possible options that the township has, whether that's liquidating some non-essential assets to help make up for this problem that we have. It didn't happen overnight. It happened over decades of mismanagement. That's not on any one person here. In fact, probably much of it was before any of us even got here, but things that we've inherited. But it's not, in my opinion, to be fixed on the back of our residents and our taxpayers. They've had enough, and they can only tolerate so much. So poor choices that were made in the past, mismanagement that was made in the past, I think the township has to look at every available option before we look to place that burden on our residential customers or our commercial customers. Thank you.
You're absolutely right. Water and sewer rates, the reason why we're here today trying to fix a problem, because it is historical and it is problematic, and we'll bring it back on the 22nd and clean it up and try and get it through. Unfortunately, yeah, as Trustee Anderson said, there's a lot of history here that went in the wrong direction, and a lot of people should be held accountable for it. It probably won't be. It's unfortunate. We are a victim of GLWA and MID, and when they raise their prices, we pay for it. Just a quick note, we pay in advance too, so it comes out of our fund before we get the bill, they get the service, and then we're holding the bag. So we'll continue, we'll try and fix it and get it back here so the board can at least move forward with it. The senior wing is nearing completion as most of the renovations over at Town Hall. The construction is near done. As you walk through, you can see we're returning to original space, original design. It has gone very well. The seniors are going to be back in. We've got facilities and the contractor beginning to make the renovations in for the senior wing. So hopefully, as we had indicated, sometime August, hopefully they'll reoccupy that space. We had another heavier rain event here in the township. It's very safe to say that all of the township systems and functions and ponds that we are responsible for all function appropriately. We had no failures. That doesn't mean that the systems that are in our community weren't problematic, and we identified a couple of them, private ponds and private detention ponds that need to be addressed, and we're going after them. We, again, are beholden to the county road, the Drain Commission's office, and as this board's approved, we are working on plans to clean out county drains continuously, along with roadside ditches and driveway culverts. The biggest challenge that we are witnessing right now in our township are residential private driveway culverts in the county right-of-way ditch that are open ditches that are either collapsed, failed, or blocked. Those are not our responsibility. They are the Department of Roads and the property owners, and we've tried to get that message out there. The driveway culverts have to be fixed, repaired. You have to maintain your driveway. That's per the Department of Roads, and as the attorney and I have sat with the Road Commission to try and help them resolve that problem, it does lead to substantial flooding. To one of the residents who spoke, we are very active in blight throughout the township. The comments that were made about maintaining properties, we just can't go onto properties and fix them. We have to have a court action or an enforcement order. We are doing that. We are active in it. There's again another one tonight. We have 3 that are currently in the process, and we will address those moving forward. We are very aggressive, not only in roadway signs that are being placed out against our ordinance, but also other debris that's in the county right-of-way. So with that being said, we'll move on to item 14, closed session. There is no closed session. Item 15, adjournment. Supervisor Kersten will make a motion to adjourn. Is there any support?
Support.
Clerk Barry, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned at